Hey guys, this is Kevin from Piece of Pie Math, and in today's lesson, we'll go over a concept from algebra and geometry called perimeter and area. First, we'll define what perimeter and area are, a few other concepts to help us, and then we'll apply the definitions of perimeter and area to the following shapes below: rectangle, square, parallelogram, triangle, and circle. So let's go ahead and get started with defining what those vocabulary words are. And as in any subject in school, there comes vocabulary, and math is no different. So first, we'll get started with defining what perimeter is. So perimeter is basically the distance around a figure or shape. Here, we're going to define it as the linear distance around a figure or shape. And in a little bit, you'll understand why I'm saying linear. So perimeter is the linear distance around a figure or shape. Next, let's define what area is. So area is basically the number of square units to cover a figure or shape. Or think about it as the amount of space that is contained within your shape. But here we're going to define it as the number of square units needed to cover a surface, figure, or shape. So area. The number of square units needed to cover a figure or shape. All right. So here I talk about what perimeter is, and it's basically the distance around a figure or shape. But I said it's the linear distance. But that doesn't apply to a shape such as a circle. So for a circle, the distance around that shape is referred to as circumference. So let's go ahead and define what circumference is. So circumference is the distance around a circle. All right. So talking more about circles, we're going to need a few other concepts to be defined to find the circumference and the area. So for circle, we want to first define what the center is. The center of a circle. So the center of a circle is basically the middle point of a circle, such that if you draw a line out from that point, each of those lines has the same distance to the outer part of a circle. So the center is basically the middle of a circle. And I know right now we're defining these vocabulary terms with words, and later on we're going to use shapes and figures and pictures to define what these words are too. I know a lot of you guys are, you learn better, reading and understanding the definitions of that way, and a lot of you are like me, where it's easier for me to understand the definitions and concepts using pictures or diagrams. But let's get through defining each of these vocabulary terms using words, and then we'll start to use pictures to understand these concepts better. So, next for a circle, the next vocabulary word that we want to define is the diameter of a circle. So, diameter. And diameter is the distance across a circle through the center. So the distance across a circle through its center. Simple enough, and these are all words that you've probably heard already, but we just want to put a definition behind them before we start using them and defining them mathematically. So the next word we want to define for circle is radius. And radius is the distance from the center of a circle to any point along the outside of a circle. So radius is the distance from the center to any point on the outside of a circle. Great. So now we've defined all the vocabulary words that we need for today's lesson, and let's go ahead and start applying these definitions to the shapes I mentioned above. So the first shape that we are going to apply these definitions to are, so number one, having a little trouble with the pad here. So number one is the rectangle. And I'm sure you guys already know by now what a rectangle is, but for thoroughness, let's just go ahead and define what a rectangle is. So a rectangle is a four-sided shape. It has four sides, such that the opposite sides have equal length. So opposite sides have equal length. And the two lengths of the rectangle are equal distant, and the two widths of the rectangle are equal distance. So two lengths and two widths are the same distance. And I like to go ahead and use several definitions for someone to latch on to what is the definition that they can remember the easiest. And all these are, perfectly fine, but basically a rectangle is a four-sided shape such that the opposite sides have equal length. All right. So let's go ahead and draw out our rectangle here. I know, not the best drawing. All right, so here's our rectangle. And we'll say that the longer sides here are length, and we'll use L to define it. L is the length. And this shorter side we'll say is the width, or we'll use W to define it. And in math, in geometry, we use this symbol here to show that each side, or certain sides of a shape, have equal measures or distance, and you basically use these slash marks. So we'll put one slash mark through each of these sides, meaning these two sides, or the two lengths, have the same distance or measure. And we'll use two slash marks here to show that this shorter side, or the width, have the same distance or measure. Cool. Now we've defined what a rectangle is, we showed what it is, and we're going to use L and W, or length and width, to define the sides of the rectangle. So let's go ahead and find and define what the perimeter of a rectangle is. So perimeter. All right. So the perimeter of the rectangle is the linear distance around this shape. So you can think of it as the sum of all sides. If you added up the length of all of these sides around the rectangle, will give you the perimeter. So it's basically the length of one side plus the length of its other side plus the width of one side plus the width of the opposite side. And using algebra here, we have two lengths, and we can represent that as 2 times the length of one side plus 2 times the width of one side. And to further take this one step further, we can use the distributive property of algebra to define the perimeter as 2 times the length plus the width. And that is our algebraic definition of what perimeter is. Now let's go ahead and define what area is. Then what we'll do is we'll do a couple of examples of calculating the perimeter and the area. So area again is the number of square units needed to cover this shape. So area is basically the space contained within the rectangle. So it's going to be this space here. And that is our area. So it's the number of square units. So area is defined as the length times the width, which is area. Simple enough. So now we've defined algebraically what perimeter and area are. So let's go ahead and use an example to help us understand this better. All right. So we'll go ahead and draw out our example rectangle here. Okay. So we'll say the length of a side, let's just go ahead and say 7. And the width of a side, let's just go ahead and say 3. So again, perimeter is equal to 2 times the length plus the width. In this case, we have 2 times length, which is 7, plus the width, which is 3. Solving this further is 2 times, and then 7 plus 3 is 10. So our perimeter is simply 20. So the perimeter of this rectangle is simply 20 units around the outside. And that could be feet, meters, yards, inches, centimeters, whatever. Next, we have area. And area is defined as the length times the width. And we have this as, so the length is 7 times the width is 3. And 7 times 3 is 21. So the amount of space contained within this rectangle is 21 square units. And again, that can be 21 feet squared, 21 meters squared, 21 centimeters squared, 21 yards squared. And that is perimeter and area for a rectangle. Now let's go ahead and do this for a square. All right, so number 2. So a square, very much like a rectangle. I'm sure you guys have heard this before and already understand what a square is, but for thoroughness, let's go ahead and define it. So a square is a 4-sided figure or shape. So 4-sided shape. Such that all sides of this figure or shape are equal. So all sides are the same measure. All sides are equal distance. All right, so let's go ahead and draw our square. This looks much better than the rectangle. And I tried to draw it out as, proportionally as I could, but as you can see, all 4 sides of this shape are the same distance. And we'll use the same notation as above. I think I used green, and we'll draw our slash marks through it. And with this notation, you can see that both of these sides are equal distance, but the opposite sides of these are also the same measure. Here, we're going to use the letter S to define the measure of a side. So S is the symbol that we'll use to define the measure of the side of a square. And basically, since all of these sides are the same measure or distance, you can say that they're all S. And the perimeter of a square is simply the sum of all the sides, or the linear distance of the figure or shape. So the perimeter is simply the sum of all the sides, and there are 4 of them, so it's just S plus S plus S plus S. And simplifying this algebraically, we have 4 S's, and perimeter can simply be defined as 4 times the distance of one of these sides. Now I'll move on to area. So area is the square distance needed to cover this figure or shape. And what I'm talking about here is area is the space contained within the square, or this space here. And area is simply the measure of one side squared, or S times S. So simple enough. So now that we have the algebraic definitions of what perimeter and area are for a square, let's go ahead and use an example to further help us understand this better. So we'll draw out our example square here. Do this as best as we can. Okay. So we'll go ahead and say that the length of these sides are 5. So S equals 5 and S equals 5. Since it's a square, we know that all 4 sides are the same distance, and we can go ahead and find our perimeter and area. So perimeter is equal to 4 times S, or 4 times the length of one side. And that is simply 4 times 5. And 4 times 5 is simply 20. So the distance around this square is 20 units, or it could be 20 feet, 20 meters, 20 centimeters, 20 yards, whatever unit of measurement you're using. But the perimeter here is 20. Now we'll do area. So area is algebraically defined as the length of a side squared, or the length of a side times the length of a side. And here, the length of a side is 5. So we have 5 squared, which equals 25. So 25 squared units fit within this square here. So you can say that the area of this square is 25 units squared. It can be 25 feet squared, 25 meters squared, 25 centimeters squared, and so on and so forth, whatever unit of measure you're using. All right. So that is perimeter and area for square. So let's move on to the next shape. All right. So we're going to get a little bit more difficult here, and we are going to find the perimeter and area of a parallelogram. And I'm sure you guys have heard this word before, but let's go ahead and define it to be thorough. So a parallelogram is a four-sided shape. And such that opposite sides are parallel. So opposite sides of this shape are parallel. Opposite sides are parallel. And for simplicity here, we're going to assume that each of the opposite sides are of equal length. So let's go ahead and draw out our parallelogram. It's almost looking good, but I think you guys can get the idea here. So we'll say that we'll use A and B to define the sides. So we'll say that this is side A and this is side B. Now, in a perfect drawing, side A and its opposite side would be parallel. And for simplicity's sake, we're going to say that they are the same distance or measure, and side B and its opposite side would be parallel. And for simplicity's sake, we're going to say that these sides are the same distance or measure. All right, so let's go ahead and define perimeter for parallelogram. All right, so again, the perimeter is the linear distance around a figure or shape, or the sum of each of these sides. So we can just say that for a parallelogram, the perimeter is the length of side A plus the length of its opposite side, we'll call it A as well, plus the length of side B, plus the length of its opposite side, we'll also call it B. And algebraically, we have two A's plus 2 times B. And using the distributive property, we have 2A plus B. So the perimeter is 2 times the length of side A plus the length of side B. All right, let's go ahead and define area. All right. So the area is basically the base, the length of the base of the parallelogram. So we're going to say that side A is the base. Think of it like that. And then it is it's base times the length of its height. And we'll say that this is the height here. So the height is measured from this corner here all the way down to its side here. So area is base times height. And I'm running out of room. Spelled it wrong. Base times height. And we'll just draw it there. So base times height. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into an example. All right, and we'll draw out our example parallelogram here. Getting better at drawing these. Okay. So let's define our sides. So the base, we'll say, is equal to 6. This side, we'll call it side A. Sorry, I'm going back and forth between what symbols and letters I'm using for the sides. We'll say is 4. Now, let's go ahead and define the height of this. And really, there's a better way to find what the height is of this parallelogram. So this side here is basically a right triangle, and we could go ahead and figure out what the exact height is, but let's just do some hand waving here and just go ahead and say that the height is equal to 3, just for simplicity's sake. Now, the perimeter, we said, and it's very much like a rectangle. So the perimeter is equal to 2 times, and since we're already calling it the base, 2 times the base plus side A. And what we have is, so it's equal to 2. And we said that the base is 6. And the measure of side A is 4. And quickly solving this, we have 2 times 6 plus 4 is 10, or the perimeter is equal to 20. So the linear distance around this parallelogram is 20 feet, 20 meters, 20 centimeters, 20 decimeters, whatever your unit of measurement is. Now let's go ahead and calculate area. So the area is simply the base times the height. So B times H, base times the height. Our base is 6 times the height is 3. And our area is 18. 18 units squared, 18 feet squared, 18 centimeters squared, you get the idea. So basically the area is 18 units squared. All right, that does it for the parallelogram. Now let's move on to the triangle. And before I move on, I just want to say that these four-sided shapes or polygons are a special type of shape called a quadrilateral. And let me just go ahead and define this for you real quick, because I think it's kind of important to understand all these, definitions that are used. So all of these are called quadrilaterals. And a quadrilateral is a four-sided polygon such that it has four edges or sides, basically a four-sided polygon, and it has four corners. So the rectangle, square, and parallelogram all fall under the definition of a polygon, or more particularly a quadrilateral, which is a four-sided polygon that has four corners. So I just wanted to, throw that extra definition in there for you. All right, so let's do triangle now. So number 4 is triangle. And just like the other three shapes, I'm sure you've already heard of what a triangle is. And basically, a triangle has three sides, but not all sides have to be equal length. They can be equal length, so all three sides can be equal length, or two of the sides can be equal length, or none of the sides have to be equal length. So not all sides have to be equal length. So let's go ahead and define perimeter. Well, before we do that, let's just jump back and draw our triangle. So in this case, we are going to use an example where the three sides of the triangle are not the same. So here's side 1, side 2, and side 3. Oh, man. Okay. Whew. So we'll say this is side A, side B, and side C. And then to help us, we're going to define this as the height. So this triangle has sides A, B, and C, all different distances or measures, and has a certain height. And side A, we're going to say has length 8. Side C has length 5, and side B is length 3. And we're going to say that the height is 3. All right. So let's use this, and now we're going to define what the perimeter is. So the perimeter, again, is the linear distance around this shape, or the sum of all three sides, which is just simply A plus B plus C. So side A plus side B plus side C. And since all three sides are different length, we can't simplify this further using algebra. And then we'll define the area. So the area is 1/2 times the base, which is side A. So just like the parallelogram, it has a base, and that is side A. So 1/2 times the base times the height. Okay. So let's go ahead and use our example here that we just already defined, and we'll find what the perimeter and the area are. And if you can hear that noise in the background, that is my bird clicking his beak at its cage, and I apologize. All right, so the perimeter again, we said is side A plus side B plus side C. So it's A plus B plus C, or side A is 8 plus side B is 3 plus side C is 5. And that, solving that, works out to be 8 plus 3 plus 5 is 11 plus 5 is 16. So the perimeter of this triangle is 16 units. Now we'll get to area. Which is defined above, which is 1/2 base times height, or 1/2. And the base is side A, which is 8, times the height, which we said was 3. And working this out, we have 1/2 times 8, which is 4 times 3, which is 12. So the area contained within these three sides is 12 units squared, or 12 feet squared, 12 meters squared, 12 centimeters squared, and so on and so forth. So that is the definition of a triangle and the algebraic definitions of perimeter and area for a triangle. And let's move on to our last shape. Okay, so to recap, we've gone over perimeter and area for a rectangle, square, parallelogram, circle, and now, triangle, and now we are on circle. So number 5 is a circle. And we all know what a circle is, but let's define this just to be thorough. And it is the set of all points in a plane that are the same distance from the center. So it's the set of all points on a plane such that the distance from the center to any point are the same. All right. I know that's a mouthful, just for simple shape as the circle. So let's go ahead and draw it. I don't think this is going to turn out as good as the other shapes, but our circle is going to look something like this. And our middle point would be somewhere right here. And going back to the vocabulary that we defined earlier, we have the diameter, which is the distance through the circle and its center point. So this distance is, we'll call it d, is diameter. And then the radius is the distance from the middle point or the center to any point along the edge of the circle. And we'll call that r, or radius. So we use r is radius. And d is diameter. And let's go ahead and define. So here it's not perimeter again, it's called circumference. And here, circumference is defined as something called 2 times this mathematical constant known as pi times the radius, or it's also known as the diameter d. Oops, let's use red just to be thorough. D times pi. Now pi is this constant, which is approximately 3.1415926535897, and it continues on forever. But it is just a way to relate the circumference to the radius or the diameter. But pi, again, is 3.14, and that is basically a definition that you'll probably carry with you throughout, all of school, all of math. A very important constant, and yeah, that's just what it is. So circumference is defined as 2 times pi times r, or the diameter times pi. And now we will define what area is. So area is equal to, again, our friend pi times the radius squared. So the inside part of this circle, the area, is defined as pi times r, or the radius squared. So let's go ahead and use an example to solidify this. All right, so let's draw out our example circle again. I know, great looking circle. Our center point is here. Our diameter is this line through the center. And this is our radius. So let's say the radius is equal to 5. And the diameter is just 2 times the radius, so the diameter would be equal to 10. Now let's find circumference. And that is equal to 2 pi r. Now plugging in our numbers from our circle. So 2 times the radius, so 2 times 5 is 10 times pi, or 10 times 3.14, which is good enough, or it's basically 31.4 units. So the circumference, or the distance around this circle, is 31.4 units. Now let's find the area. So area is equal to our friend pi times r squared and that equals pi times r squared, which is 25. And we can just say that the area is 25 pi. Or basically it's going to be a little bit more than 75. But for your teachers, leaving it in these terms, 25 pi is probably fine. And I would accept that as a correct answer if I was your teacher. All right. So that does it for today's lesson for finding perimeter and area for the different shapes: rectangle, square, parallelogram, triangle, and circle. I hope you guys found this useful. I hope you guys use this for your classes and homework. And please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this content useful. I'll be coming out with more videos in the future covering algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, pre-algebra, precalculus, calculus 1, 2, and 3, linear algebra. And then we're going to get into some of the tougher stuff within data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So again, I'm glad you guys tuned in. Hope you found it useful, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.